Hi, welcome today. I'm Victoria Alvin from Kingspan. I'm the General Manager of Technical Services and Building Technology. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Choosing the Right Underlay for Your Project. If you just give us a moment, we're just waiting for a couple of more participants to join us and we're going to start bang on 12:30. With me today, I've got Marie Maxwell, who's our technical lead for Kingspan Technical, and Tong Tong Yu, product manager for underlays. They're both going to be answering the chat today while I speak. So if you have any questions, please just come through on the chat and we'll address those at the end of the session. We're here for 45 minutes, probably about 30 minutes of me talking, and then we have Q&A time at the end. Today, we're going to be talking about choosing the right underlay for your project. And specifically, we're going to be discussing some testing and some work that's been done in the industry since we saw a high number of cases with synthetic absorbent underlays disintegrating ahead of the warranty period. Now, I'm going to note those underlays were across all brands in the market in New Zealand, whether they were brands, code marked, or without either of those qualifications. The issues appeared to be heavily aligned to the use of an underlay in the shed market or open canopy style. And we also noticed at the same time that fashion trends were meaning that darker colours were being used in these buildings. We noted that sometimes the temperatures under those darker colours could get as high as 90 or 100 degrees Celsius. So we wondered whether that was a contributing factor. We started to work with brands who are, of course, very interested in this testing program and also our other New Zealand underlay suppliers in the market through our own testing site here at our manufacturing plant in Otawa for Thermakraft underlays, but with the brand's facilities as well. You can see in the images below, these are the type of buildings that we were seeing some issues with: dark coloured sheds with multiple doors, open bay sheds and canopies and soffits. An example was a property that we looked at in Kerikeri. Now, this was roofed with Thermakraft CoverTech 403, and they were all done at the same time. This is the canopy on the left-hand side, and you can see the kind of disintegration that we were seeing in many of the complaints that came forward, both in Thermakraft underlay, but in all other supplier underlays that we reviewed. The product exhibited as a flaky failure, where the product simply disintegrated, as you can see the image there clearly in that open canopy. The shed workshop in this building had 3 large roller doors, and whilst there was some minor cracking in the underlay was in good condition. And in the house, you can quite clearly see that the underlay is in a near perfect condition in the house. So this got us quite interested in what might be causing the failure and why it was so focused in these open markets. We also saw in canopy, lean-to and unlined soffit applications, these are a variety of underlay providers examples, that we were seeing a lot of uncontrolled UV. In these applications, we didn't feel that the heat generated underneath the dark coloured roofing material was such a contributing factor because, of course, the heat can dissipate in such an open application. Now, I will note that the industry does know that these applications are not suitable for an underlay, but people do tend to use an underlay at times in these applications. So we are aware that plastic degradation in the environment is primarily caused by abiotic factors. That's things like sunlight, heat, and oxidization or thermal stress, as well as biotic factors such as microorganisms. We looked at the 2 factors we thought were most likely to cause the type of issue that we were seeing: thermal oxidization or heat stress, and indirect or direct light, UV attack. We also considered thermal expansion, but that's more likely to exhibit as a tear in the underlay, and we considered chemical attack, but that is more likely to exhibit as a fusing or a burning of the product, not the failure mode that we were seeing of the flaky and disintegration of the synthetic underlay. So we conducted external and internal testing to look at the heat aging effect on synthetic underlays, and we looked at our UV testing that we were already doing as part of our publication of the performance of an underlay. You'll be well used to seeing on a data sheet the short-term exposure of either 7 days commonly for a roofing material or perhaps 90 days for wall material. And we already have an extensive series of online research papers from universities and other facilities looking at the relation between plastic degradation and UV. In the testing that we did with brands, this was an external testing program. Kingspan Thermakraft asked for the 3 products that we most commonly use in the shed market to be included: CoverTech 215, CoverTech 403, and CoverTech 405. And of course, other brand underlays were included by brands in this testing program. The testing was to simulate 15 years of in-service life with heat, typically looking at 90 to 100 degrees Celsius of heat, mimicking the heat that we would see under that dark coloured roofing material, the extreme case. We found that there was a minor decrease in the mechanical strength of the underlay, but however, the products did test as still waterproof, still water vapor permeable after this aging period, i.e. they were still performing as they should perform from original. The internal testing program that Kingspan did, as I say, at our Otawa laboratory in our manufacturing facility here, was able to be more extensive. So we did 210 days, 15 to 20 years of service life. And again, we used CoverTech products out of the Thermakraft range, including our bituminous 215, Thermakraft 215 black paper, and competitor products as well. Again, we mimicked the same type of results that we found in the brand's external testing, a decrease in the mechanical strength of the product. I will note that actually the Thermakraft 215, the black paper, actually showed one of the most significant decreases in mechanical strength. But however, they all still remained waterproof and they were in line with the external testing result. So looking at the internal and the external heat aging, we found that we didn't have a product that exhibited the same failure mode as we'd seen on the site visits, the flaky appearance from the underlay. We found that the Thermakraft 215, the black paper, as many will say, doesn't exhibit that failure mode, but it does become very brittle and fragile, as we saw in the decrease in mechanical strength. We found that the lighter underweight products were definitely more susceptible to the heat stress, basically because they didn't have as much mechanical strength to start with. So when they have been degraded, they become even less strong. So we thought it's not heat that we're looking at as the sole factor. What's the next step? We started to look at the UV. Now, as I say, all underlay providers will test and publish the reduction in mechanical strength for their products post the aging period that they put on their data sheet. So either 60 days or 7 days, depending on what the product is and where it's been put. Typically, that testing's done on direct UV, UV that comes directly from the sun. And we were becoming very interested in reflected or indirect UV, UV that might come from, say, 10 to 15% from concrete reflecting or from glass, perhaps car roofs or other shiny surfaces that might be reflecting into the building and therefore hitting the underlay. We looked at some other products to come to market. This is an example of a product that we tested to try and see what was the relation of UV. Here on the left-hand side, you can see we've got 262 newtons of strength in the product. That's the unaged test before we conduct any UV testing. We tested this one for approximately 60 days of UV testing, and the reduction of strength was from 262 to 6 newtons. So a significant failure of performance when presented with UV. And that is just direct UV over 60 days. I'm going to put that in perspective. At 6 newtons, you can't pick up the product. 10 newtons is when it's starting to flake. So 6 newtons is very, very light. We also have a lot of history in New Zealand of an understanding of both UV and direct UV and the results that it can have. We know that you're going to get burned with reflected UV on the water or under snow, and we know that you can get burnt under a sun umbrella on the beach. So we felt this is a very common understanding, and we see it play out in all testing. We modelled some of the UV testing here in a graph that is typical model for something like a boat shed, a large boat shed that you're putting your boat in. It has a large roller door on it, and most of the time you've got that locked up. This example shows here on the left, we have the tensile strength. So kilonewtons for the tensile strength against a true aluminium foil like this product. This is Thermabar 344, so aluminium foil with a white reflective face. And CoverTech 403, a typical synthetic underlay product. Now, across the bottom, there's the UV aging period. So you can see as the products age, they decrease in mechanical strength. Over 15 years, it might lose as much as 15% of its tensile strength due to UV aging. There was no product that we saw in any of our testing that was able to withstand prolonged UV exposures for either a synthetic or foil. But we do know that a foil product starts with a much higher mechanical strength, a true aluminium foil product. And therefore, even though it might have a degradation in strength, it is still going to be significantly more strong and in performance than a synthetic product, where, as you can see, the mechanical strength is heavily degraded by UV. We know that we're using underlays to mitigate the risk of condensation effects, and we know that the building code states that an underlay is not needed in a standalone garage or warehouse. In fact, E2 only covers buildings up to 10 metres in height and for attached garages. The metal roofing manufacturer's code of practice has recently been updated to basically take in hand the risks that we see from UV. All underlays, particularly those made from synthetics, including some foils can be made from synthetic materials and not true aluminium foil. They may be vulnerable to the degradation from fumes and reflected UV. And there's a call for you to contact your supplier there to discuss. With this knowledge and the result of the testing, Kingspan Thermakraft would like to advise the market that from July the 1st, 2025, the scope for Thermakraft synthetic absorbent underlays will be limited to lined buildings. That means that the synthetic absorbent underlay will be protected from UV damage by the lining of the building. Of course, any unlined buildings that are installed with a synthetic absorbent underlay prior to that warranty or scope of use change date on the 1st of July will be warranted as per the Thermakraft warranty process. Now, that is as long as they're installed within the existing literature guidelines. So we do not warrant and have not warranted for some time canopies, soffits, and lean-to applications, fully open applications. Let me take you through what a lined building is. E2 says lining is the rigid sheet covering for wall, ceiling, or other interior surface. In the kind of building that we live in here as a manufacturing and office plant and our roll-forming customers live in, we have a warehouse which is unlined, typically uninsulated, and that will have a foil product to reflect light back into the building and reduce electricity costs. On the office side, it's a lined building, so typically it will have plasterboard insulation, keeping the office workers happy and warm. So what underlay should I be using in my shed or standalone garage going forward with this information? As I've said, we do not know of any underlay product that can withstand prolonged UV exposure over several years with no degradation for the product. Neither ourselves or brands have been able to show that performance for a synthetic absorbent underlay or a synthetic foil. We know that mechanical black paper will lose its, that Thermakraft black paper will lose its mechanical strength when presented with heat stress. For a shed style building, they have high levels of reflected UV. As we see an example here, 3 roller doors that might be open at any one time, a lot of UV that's entering the building. And this reflected UV can really add up over the lifetime of a building, giving you perhaps an extra 8 or 10 years of UV degradation to the building that we would otherwise have reported on. So we would recommend that in a building such as a shed with high reflected UV, use a true aluminium foil product. Now, this is our product, Thermabar 344. It's a woven aluminium foil. It has a scrim reinforcing underneath this light synthetic face. The synthetic face is simply for reflection. It'll give you about 75% light reflection. It's suitable for sheds, barns, and garages because it will reflect the light out of the building, and with the high mechanical strength, it will survive the reflected UV quotas over time. You can either use the silver side facing down towards the building that can reflect more UV out, or the white side down for a cleaner aesthetic finish. And from July the 1st, 2025, we will have this product as self-supporting on the data sheets as well. You might ask, well, what if I have a situation that actually has high internal moisture? Now, foil underlays are not absorbent underlays. They're not going to take condensation and release it at a later date. So where there is high moisture or limited ventilation, you may require an air gap above the foil. That's going to separate the foil from the cladding, and the dew point will form underneath the cladding and not underneath the aluminium foil material. That air gap needs to be ventilated from eaves to ridge, and separated as per the detail you've seen here. Now, my team would be very happy to help somebody through this detail, so I'm going to give you those contact details at the end of the presentation. The other question that we need to address is, what if my shed or standalone garage will become a sleep out in the future? A foil is not absorbent. It cannot be used in a lined building because it will not absorb the condensation and then release it at a later time. That condensation might build up and cause damage to the other materials within that roofing structure. So in a lined building, it must be an absorbent, permeable underlay material. So when we have a building that is starting life and it may be turned into a lined building at a later date, the advice would be to the client that they start with a synthetic absorbent underlay and use a lining material to protect that from UV from the beginning of the building life. What underlay am I using in my warehouse? Well, warehouses typically have a much lower level of reflected UV, simply due to their style of construction. They have less doors. The doors opening might be part of the wall, much bigger floor space, perhaps canopies and drive-throughs protecting as well. I'll note in these applications, we might use our original Thermabar 344 underlay, but for a cleaner, whiter finish, a synthetic foil underlay, such as Thermabar 397 with that cleaner white face giving 80% light reflectivity, is often very popular in these buildings. We have had no degradation issues of Thermakraft products in this type of warehouse application. We are not seeing the UV degradation in these applications. We're seeing it in that shed market. So 397 is not a product we would put into the shed market because it is synthetic. It's not a true aluminium foil. And you'll find a similar story across other underlay providers looking for a true aluminium foil in that shed market. The other product that we have for this market is ASL Insuliner. It's got a little tiny thin piece of phenolic foam in there, giving a small R value to reflect heat out of the building and that construction. A lean-to and canopy, there is no underlay that is warranted for a lean-to, canopy, soffit, carport, open bay shed application. They don't require the use of an underlay. They are very open to ventilation. They dry very quickly. And finally, for your home or your office, what would be the underlay that you would look into that application? It needs to be a synthetic, absorbent, permeable underlay, such as the CoverTech Thermakraft range. These underlays are installed behind a lining, which will protect them from UV exposure. They will absorb moisture, allow it to evaporate, and prevent condensation buildup. So they're going to dry with the natural pathway through the roof structure. So in summary today, UV and direct and indirect causes damage to synthetic absorbent permeable underlays. From July the 1st, Kingspan Thermakraft synthetic absorbent underlay scope is limited to use in line buildings. We will honour all warranties and applications before that date as long as they are in line with our literature guidelines. From July the 1st, Thermabar 344, our aluminium foil reinforced underlay, will be self-supporting and it can be installed either white face down or silver face down. For a shed standalone garage, we would recommend an aluminium reinforced foil underlay, such as Thermabar 344. For an industrial warehouse, a synthetic foil, such as Thermabar 397, an aluminium reinforced foil underlay, such as Thermabar 344, or an insulated foil, such as ASL Insuliner. For a lined building, a synthetic absorbent underlay, such as the Kingspan CoverTech range of underlays. You may have questions and you may want to talk through your project. You may want some help as you work through these changes for your business. technical@kingspaninsulation.co.nz is where you'll come for your first information, or 0800 806 595, where you can speak in person to the technical team. Of course, your Thermakraft account manager will also be able to assist you with information, and we're here to support you as you transition through these changes for your business. That's the end of our webinar topic today, but I am going to throw open to the chat line. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions there, and you can talk to us about what you might want to ask. We'll go there. Marie and Tong Tong, do we have chat?
Just one question from Daniel, if whether we're going to be sharing the presentation. Yes, we will.
Yes, thank you. This presentation is recorded and is going to be emailed to you as a person who is registered for this program. You're also going to be sent a series of connections to perhaps our selector guides to enable you to choose the right underlay for your particular application, be it a shed, a warehouse, a Ministry of Education or residential application, and links to knowledge articles where we'll be talking about the various information that we have here today and enabling you to understand it in more detail. Naturally, if you would like us to talk to your team and make sure that the message comes through to your team in a clean and clear manner, we'd be very happy to come and chat too. Are there any other questions for us today? No. Your account managers will be able to talk to you about the pricing structures for the products if you don't have a Thermabar 344 pricing, but I think it's in most price lists today. At that point, without any further questions, I might close our webinar today and say thank you for your time. We are rerunning this on May the 6th for the architectural community. We are updating our master spec and smart spec and all other points of literature for the 1st of July date. We look forward to working with you as you transition through these stages. And please, if you have any queries whatsoever, please touch base. With regard to the query, if you have a warranty fault, please touch base. We'll work through each warranty claim as they come through and discuss the applications there. So if you find that you already have an underlay that's disintegrated, again, you can email it through to technical@kingspaninsulation.co.nz, and we'll be very happy to address those on a case-by-case basis.
There's also some questions on the Q&A.
Thank you.
From Shannon, can we please have a copy of the PDF sent out? And
Absolutely.
Then, yep. And then from Shane Griffin, what about wool wraps?
Wool wraps would be the same conversation. If it's a synthetic absorbent underlay or synthetic underlay, it is not to be exposed to the UV or reflected UV. So if you had a shed or an open garage, standalone garage, then one would expect that that is going to be a lined application if it has a synthetic underlay in it. Remembering as well that if you start with a foil underlay and wish to turn it to a lined building later, that's not going to be acceptable. It needs to start with a synthetic absorbent underlay, or we can discuss with you the implications and how you might move through that change. We'd be very happy to deal with that with our technical team on a case-by-case basis because they can be different. Have we got anything else on Q&A? There's a question there about Drydex. I'm afraid Drydex is not a Kingspan Thermakraft product, Stuart, so I'm afraid I can't offer any conversation about a product that's not within my portfolio. We haven't done those sort of testing on those products. They're not one of our family, I'm sorry. Okay, I can't see any more questions on there. And rather than keeping you waiting in an awkward silence, I'll close the webinar. But please take a note of what you see on screen here. Take a photo, and just as something occurs to you later in the day, please touch base and let us know how we can help you and talk you through your particular concern. Thank you once again for your time today. Thank you for joining us. This will be emailed out to you. You will get a copy of it. We're looking forward to working with you. Thank you very much.